and welcome to a special interview with The Wire. My name is Rebecca George, and today we have the honor of speaking with Debal. Fondly known as India's rice warrior, Deb is both an agrarian scientist with his research published in more than 40 peer-reviewed journals, as well as a farmer based in Odisha, India. Deb began conserving indigenous varieties of rice in the 1990s after realizing that these varieties were losing their cultivation ground to modern and high-yielding varieties during the Green Revolution. Today, on a modest 1.7-acre farm in Odisha, Deb conserves nearly 1,500 varieties of indigenous rice. His conservation efforts are not to preserve a record of the past, but to help future agriculture adapt to climate instabilities. Deb has documented scores of varieties of indigenous rice with properties like flood tolerance, drought tolerance, pest tolerance, and he shares these varieties freely with thousands of small farmers. Deb has even documented indigenous varieties of rice that are more nutritious and climate resilient than those varieties patented by the International Rice Research Institution. Over the course of our discussion today, we asked Deb, what is it that makes these varieties evolve to be so resilient? With that, I would like to give a warm welcome to Deb. Thank you so much for joining us, Deb. Let me start by asking you, what does it mean for a crop variety to be resilient?
In fact, this term resilience is borrowed from the engineering discipline to describe a system which gets deranged after a perturbation, but then it has a capacity to return to its original equilibrium position. Once there is some kind of natural perturbation, like drought or flood or any kind of climatic or even environmental disaster like pest attack or disease attack and all of these, it will definitely get deranged. It's the physiology of the plant will react to it. Maybe the productivity potential will be lowered and so on. But very soon, after a very short while, it can bounce back to its original capacity. Some crop varieties which have evolved over centuries and centuries because it had already, experienced a series of this kind of environmental disasters in its history, evolutionary history. And as a result, it has incorporated many kinds of genetic prowess to adapt to these kind of climate changes, despite all this kind of perturbation. That's the meaning of resilience. And this resilience is a property of most of the native varieties of crops, which we call land races, which were evolved in the hands of ancient farmers over millennia.
By way of introducing yourself, can you tell us how you've come to conserve nearly 1,500 indigenous rice varieties, and why does it matter?
Well, I was not trained as an agriculturist. I am an ecologist, and especially with mathematical models of ecological stability and extinction of species and so on. When I was dealing with these problems, we learned that a species whose genetic diversity has reduced very much. Now, if you truncate this genetic diversity, the probability of extinction of that species is enhanced. So that means, if the 50% of the genetic diversity is lost, then the extinction probability is more than 2 times enhanced. So we noticed that in case of rice, Indian rice, for example, we used to have 110,000 varieties of rice, which means that was the enormous range of genetic diversity of rice, Indian rice, Oryza sativa as the species. Now, when I started looking at it, was early 1990s, we found that almost 90% of the genetic diversity is lost from the farmers' fields, which means 90% of the genetic diversity is lost, and that entails that the probability of extinction of the species is more than 9 times. So any kind of single disaster, one single pest outbreak, or some kind of disease outbreak, or some kind of natural calamity, and the species is bound to go extinct unless we actually restore its genetic diversity. So that was this understanding as an ecologist that brought me to the commitment to conserving it. So then I thought that no, because as a concerned citizen, uh, let's start doing it. I started working with it without this kind of technical knowledge of technical training in agriculture, which eventually I learned very thoroughly. In the hope that eventually more competent people, more expert agriculturists would come over and take over this duty, the task. But so far, I'm still alone, and I'm doing this. And I started with just about 200 varieties of rice initially in West Bengal. So whatever variety I have are the last extant remnant genetic diversity of the rice from West Bengal. Then we added varieties from all other states. So I'm now conserving varieties from 12 states of India, and this total is 1,480. It's not my hobby, but a kind of commitment that I must have as a concerned citizen and a knowledgeable person to commit to conserving this for the future of agriculture and the future of the farmers. It's my duty. It's my life's calling.
What is it that gives these varieties those properties of being that resilient or evolving to be resilient or nutritious in a very unique way?
In fact, this was not given by nature. These were all the properties. The genetic diversity means some genes, say a set of genes which makes a variety salt tolerant. Okay? So which can withstand salinity or seawater incursion on the coastal areas. But that is a property which is not found in all the varieties. So some varieties, maybe a mutation or some kind of genetic diversity was discovered accidentally by experimentation by an ancient farmer. And this farmer finds, oh, this is the variety which still can grow in this saline land. So let me cultivate that one. So that's the process of selection. So from botanical of these varieties, some grains which showed its kind of resistance, this farmer selected those varieties and repeatedly bred them over generations. This is called selective breeding. And this selective breeding, a conscious exercise of breeding by these ancient farmers, whom I call unnamed, unknown scientists. Those farmer scientists who did not know anything about DNA or protein or enzymes, but they achieved those things. And those were the varieties they actually achieved by domesticating them. They nurtured this diversity, perpetuated this one, they fixed that line so that the whole line remains pure. So that particular color, that particular property, that particular aroma, taste, salt tolerance, for example, and all of these is stable. They don't change over centuries. And this is the feat of our unknown farmer scientists had achieved. And because they did not write down anything, and they did not take any patenting on it, no intellectual property rights was claimed by these ancient farmers, we are taught to assume that this was unscientific or pre-scientific. These are the amazing varieties which farmers did not know the genetic basis or the DNA fingerprinting, but they achieved it. Our task is to conserve them and to honor these discoveries.
Now, that leads me to another question, because today every child in India is taught about the Green Revolution and how the Green Revolution helped India avoid famines in the 1970s by leveraging science and high-yielding technology. What version of the Green Revolution do you think is missing from our textbook narrative today?
Now, US President Lyndon Johnson in 1966 made this narrative of famine. That was the first time. And this was to the astonishment of Indian agriculture minister, who never believed that it was a famine at all. It was new information from the US president who said India is having a famine. Indian agriculture minister himself didn't know. That was a very interesting news. And the US news headlines announced this famine in Bihar particularly, because Bihar was suffering from a drought in that year. And drought is very common in India, every year or the other, you have drought in some pocket or the other. But that year, in 1966, everyone said that Bihar is in drought and India is going to be in famine. Now, very strangely, in the same year after this news, British journalists, 12 British journalists actually visited Bihar and surrounding states, and they failed to find any death, any starvation deaths. They reported that we don't find any sign of famine, but the US propaganda established that this was the famine, and they imposed this now, and they blamed this Indian government not taking action. So Indira Gandhi had to take this the famine caution and so on. Of course, there was some mortality. I mean, as it happens with any kind of drought, there was some excess of mortality during this one, but this was not the kind of famine as a result of overpopulation leading to shortage of food. That was a Malthusian paradigm, that the population size is so big that India cannot now feed this increasing population. That was the main propaganda that continues and still continues. And every time we are told that because of this is the increasing population, we have to feed them. This drought had provided what Bolau himself said, this is the opportune moment to promote this green revolution. And in 1967, there was a very nice rainfall in northern India, especially in Punjab, Haryana area. And as a result, and on top of the ample irrigation, because that was part of this green revolution technology, the 1967-68 season brought a bumper wheat crop. So they said that this bumper wheat crop, which is the seed from Mexican green revolution seed, see, this is the result. Okay. Now, nobody noticed that at the same year, all the other crops like, sesame, cotton, rice, jute, all of these had achieved a record harvest. Nobody noticed that. Because Bolau emphasized on this wheat, seeds from Mexico, everyone was convinced that this is the result of the green revolution. But nobody noticed that jute had no seeds from green revolution. Jute or cotton or rice didn't have that green revolution seed, but they also had the bumper crop. It was as a result of very good monsoon and very good and also very high irrigation facility. So anyway, the myth was whipped up, and the wheat crop took all the credit. And the states where no green revolution ever set foot, like the southern states, Tamil Nadu and Andhra Pradesh, also had bumper crops in that year. But nobody noticed that. So this was simply a propaganda for promoting this agricultural industry and agricultural development that stuck. And of course, the USAID's pressure as a consequence of this, as a sequel to PL480 grain, India had to accept this in the green revolution thing. And the scientists who were opposed to this, like the head of the Botanical Survey of India opposed this, and the CRRI director, Professor Dr. Richaria, also opposed this, saying that India doesn't need this green revolution. India already has so many of the varieties which are already showing this enormous potential of growth. They were sacked. So Richaria was actually sacked. He had to establish his own private gene bank in Chhattisgarh, but he was dislodged from Central Rice Research Institute in Cuttack. Now, Bolau's flagship varieties, of course, out-yielded the indigenous tall wheats, only when at least 80 kg per hectare of fertilizers were added. Wherever this excess fertilizer was not added, they actually performed much lesser than the indigenous wheat varieties. And that was also recorded by the ICAR, but that was suppressed. Until today, until only a few years ago, now people can read those documents that this was the truth. And Baranski, in her thesis, she also mentions a detail of these kind of things. And they show that for paramount food crop of rice, for example, the growth rates in both yields and area planted actually showed a decline during the green revolution. Thus, overall rice production, which had been growing at 3.5% annually in the 1950s, just before the green revolution set forth. After the green revolution, the growth rate of rice came down to 1.9%, which is 46% drop. So after the green revolution, the growth rate of rice declined by 46%, from 3.5% growth rate to 1.9% growth rate. Total food grain production, which had been growing at 2.8% annually, slowed to a 1.9% growth rate, which is, that is during the Green Revolution years, that is 1968 to 76, which is 32% slump. So all these, despite all this kind of decline, actual decline by statistics by the government's officers themselves, despite the knowledge of the ICAR scientists, this was pushed because otherwise, they will be kicked out like the Paricharya, or they will not receive promotion, or else, they will receive, huge amount of project funding, and of course, there are many other paraphernalia. That was the hype. As a result, we have actually sold our agricultural sovereignty to a handful of multinationals, and that's the result of it. But there was no such thing prior to Green Revolution. No farmer committed suicide because of this, the loss of crop. Maybe one or two, but not this at large scale. A government's own study is that every year something like 80,000 farmers are committing suicide. This is unprecedented in India's agrarian history. So that tells enough about the food security because of the Green Revolution and prior to Green Revolution.
Especially when we're in a country where 60%, more than 60% of the country is agrarian,
exactly.
Food security can't be placed above the welfare of farmers.
Yes.
So,
in fact, this house also has this food security intricately connected to the Green Revolution technology itself. Green Revolution emphasizes monoculture. Rice after rice after rice and nothing else, or wheat after wheat after wheat in Punjab, for example. The problem is that prior to the Green Revolution, people used to grow every other crop on the same farm. So people used to grow, sesame before rice, and after rice there would be mustard for oil, and different kinds of vegetables and pulses, lentils, and all this. Today, farmers have abandoned all of these. I'm not talking of these minor millets, minor cereals like millets and others, but even oil seeds. India was one of the exporters of oil seeds to Southeast Asia and other countries. India is now importing soybean oil and palm oil, which were never consumed in India. Okay. This is the irony. India was the lump exporter of oil seeds and pulses to other countries. Now India is importing oil seeds from other countries, even this, the non-traditional oil like palm oil or soybean oil, which even the Chinese don't eat, and we are taking that one. And we are importing lentil from Canada. Can you imagine? If that is our food security, where do the farmers take us? We say we are self-sufficient, but every seed is coming from either the Philippines, all the fertilizers and pesticides are coming from Europe and America. So the farmers at the micro scale, the farmers also have to buy all those things today from the market. So originally, earlier, the farmers used to grow all of their own food on their own farm. They used to buy only their clothes and other things, but food, they were all self-sufficient. But now, whether it's a small farmer or a big farmer, they are growing rice. Now they have to sell this rice in order to buy those other foods. Whether it's oil or potato or tomato or fruits or whatever, they have to buy from market because they are not growing themselves. So that is this, the monoculture in agriculture extended to monoculture in forestry, like growing eucalyptus only and nothing else. And it has invaded our public mind also. It's monoculture of the mind, which Vandana Shiva once said, that we simply fail to think of diversity of answers, diversity of crops, diversity of lifestyles, diversity of foods, diversity of food tastes. And so we have this, today we have this motto of one country, one religion, one food style, one language, and so on and so forth. And that is in line with this monoculture of the mind.
So do you see any scenario where agroecology can come back and actually lead to a situation where we can feed ourselves as a country or even the world? Agroecology and organic methods today are very often looked at as healthier, certainly healthier food, but not productive enough and will lead to starvation eventually for countries. What's your opinion on this based on your research?
This is another myth, it's another industrial myth that is propagated. In fact, FAO itself has published a document about this agroecological, as a meta-analysis of agroecological practices, and also the IAASTD, International Working Group on this, agricultural science and technology and development, international group comprising 600 scientists from all over the world, and they published their reports, annually. So the first publication by IAASTD report, they showed that the highest productivity in the world in agriculture is from the multiple cropping farms, and especially the small farms. FAO already had observed the year of the small farms, because they declared that the small farms are the most productive, and that's the answer to food security of the world. So it's been amply documented, not only by many scientists, but also international research organizations, including FAO, Food and Agriculture Organizations of the United Nations. They have ample documentation. They have at least 3 publications from FAO, 2 publications from IAASTD, which documents country after country. Over 200 countries, they have documented more than 2,000 farmers, complete history and statistics showing that agroecology is the most productive method. In my own collection, I'm not talking of any other crops, but I'm focusing on rice, of these hundreds of varieties of rice that we grow every year. We have 15 varieties of rice which out yield the 3rd generation of IRI rice. IR8 began with IR8, which was the miracle seed, miracle rice, with bumper production, and then IR18, IR36, IR72, and so on and so forth. We have actually compared these side by side on my own farm, and we have shown that there are 15 varieties of indigenous rice in India which can out-yield any of these modern varieties despite zero agrochemical input. So we don't give any kind of urea or DAP or superphosphate. Despite all this, their yield is much higher than these so-called high-yielding varieties. The the other performance is that if you don't have enough irrigation in the land, those so-called high-yielding varieties become extremely low-yielding. They can't perform, and they will even die in drought. They always need enormous amount of input of water. Without water, no high-yielding varieties can exist. But those yielding varieties, the so-called low-yielding varieties of India, even in the face of drought, they can withstand drought, and they will give a minimum amount of it will never become zero, unlike the high-yielding varieties. Fortunately, I have this lab, and in this lab, this is the first lab which is committed to analyzing all these nutraceutical analysis of all these varieties of rice, which we had never done before. So we have started this, and we have already published many papers of analysis of metal content of different varieties of rice, or vitamin contents of rice, and so on. And we show that there are many varieties of indigenous rice varieties. In total number, so far we have studied 550 varieties. These 550, of these, there are at least 200 varieties which are so rich in antioxidants and vitamin B complex, which is never ever found in any of the modern varieties of rice. We have documented 6 varieties of rice, which we have published recently, this year itself. We have published that these varieties of rice, cooked rice, contains special kinds of fatty acids which are found in mother's milk, in a human breast milk. So it's equivalent to mother's milk. So instead of feeding this, the formula food to babies, if you feed those rice things, the baby will get those kind of fatty acids which are found only in mother's milk, in addition to some especially omega-3 fatty acids, very high omega-3 fatty acids too, which are not found in any of the formula foods. These are the amazing properties which we have lost. And similarly, we have found 68 varieties of rice which have super high content of iron. So the genetically modified iron fortified rice, which is recently being promoted by IRRI and Monsanto company. They claim that this is the highest content of iron in a developed rice, and you can see is because it's genetically engineered, it required huge amount of investment, capital investment, and they claim that this contains 8.9 milligram per kg of rice, 8.9 milligram of iron per kg of rice. In the 68 varieties that we have documented and published 2 times over in 2 peer-reviewed international science journals, they contain up to 350 milligram. 350 milligram of iron. Yeah.
The challenges today of the monopolization of food systems, do you see that solutions like Vasudha Farm can be replicable when government support is lacking? Can people do this themselves?
Yeah, Vasudha has already been, I mean, we have established in Bengal, we have established 3 seed banks, sister seed banks. We assisted them with the seeds, and they are expanding, they are still performing. And similar seed banks have already been replicated in Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, Gujarat, Karnataka, Kerala. There has been hundreds of seed banks in these remote corners. In Odisha itself, we have established 15 seed banks. In Thailand, they have seed banks. Masipag in Philippines have an enormous seed bank, and they have a chain of seed banks, farmer seed banks, with zero aid or assistance from the government or institutions. Similarly, USA also has many seed banks for farmer seed banks. Mexico, Guatemala, Bolivia, Chile, Uruguay, every country have hundreds of seed banks by the farmers, maintained by the seed banks. That is more commonsensical. If you have this the flood-prone area, you should grow that flood-tolerant rice. That's very simple. You have this annual incursion, seawater incursion on the coastal lands. So it's very commonsensical that you grow those varieties which are adapted to that particular climate and soil condition, instead of developing a new variety sitting in Delhi or New York and incorporating this gene from that Sundarban rice and then sell it. There's no benefit to the farmer because they have to pay through their nose to buy the seeds. The benefit all goes to increasing GDP by increasing the industrial profit, and of course lining the pockets of the bureaucracy in that one. So I'm not going for that at all. When we have those varieties already established, when we have already identified the genes in there, I mean, without this the presence of the genes, they couldn't have performed so well. Why not promote those varieties? Why not upscale the production of those varieties? That should be the policy. Okay. Instead of developing another new variety, incorporating and searching for a gene in the remote corners and then incorporating this by investing billions of dollars, that's a total waste of public money, and I would say a waste of intelligence, or a kind of misuse and disuse of intelligence. So it's actually disuse of science. Science is not for that. It's technology. Science is very useful use of knowledge for people's use. But technology is not necessarily so. Technology actually promotes industry. Without industry, there's no technology. Yes. But when Galileo or Darwin worked, that was science. There was no industry behind them. Galileo or Darwin or Newton. Only industry appeared only after when technology came up, and then technology vanished. So we are talking of science of agriculture. When agriculture becomes technology, it becomes a business, and then we have seed industry, fertilizer industry, genetic engineering industry, and so on and so forth. Agricultural science persists for 10,000 years, and it goes on. And that still continues to benefit the farmers, and the farmers do get the benefit if they use rationally this use of agroecology, which is a very complex science. Now we are talking of scaling up, because we focus on this IR36 to be promoted by a centralized agency, aided by an industrial thing, and when farmers will purchase them, this is the industrial model against which we are working, and our model is VRIHI, the seed bank. It's seed to seed. And although as an individual, of course, I achieved only about few thousand farmers over the past. But those 1,000 farmers, I mean, total of 3,000 farmers who took from Vihi have also exchanged their seeds with 17,000 farmers. So the scale of exchange expands. This is an expanding circle of exchange, farmer to farmer. And that's how this over the 10,000 years of agricultural revolution, we have done exactly that.
Thank you so much for your time today, Deb. I truly hope that the viewers listening feel encouraged and know that they're in the right footsteps by going for a system that is not just good for their health, but also for the health of the planet. And
yes, of course. A great pleasure. Thank you very much. Yeah.
To receive instant updates on all videos from The Wire, click the subscribe button and hit the bell icon. Pay to support independent journalism. Click the link in the description and choose the amount you want to pay.